Good morning, everybody. As Kevin mentioned, I work at the Hershey Company in beautiful Hershey, Pennsylvania. This year we are celebrating our 125th anniversary as a company. I haven't been there quite that long. This year I am celebrating my first anniversary with the company. Generally when I meet new people, I get a couple of different kinds of questions as introductory stuff, and so now that I'm meeting all of you for the first time this morning, I'd like to get a couple of those questions out of the way. The first thing tends to be generally, how do you not weigh 300 pounds? We do have the Hershey equivalent of the freshman 15. It's called the Hershey 10. You do tend to put on a little bit of weight as you tend to snack and indulge in some of the treats and confectionaries that we do have in there. But you tend to then zero in on just a couple of the products, one or two of the brands that you tend to like, and kind of exercise a little moderation, if you will. It also helps that we have a really good gym on site. I did bring a few snacks and a few treats here for the question and answer session at the end, and anybody who wants to ask a question, I'll be happy to share some of the goodness with them. The second question that people tend to ask a little bit is, do you work with these guys? Or do you know where you keep these guys? No, I'm afraid the Oompa Loompas and these orange guys, that's a different organization altogether. I can't give you any insight on these folks at all. What I will share with you, though, a little inside baseball for the Hershey Company, is that there is nothing in the world like a fresh Reese's cup. Yeah, exactly. I am fortunate and very, very lucky enough to have been able to go to the Reese's factory on a number of occasions and sample the variety of Reese's products that we make. And I make this commitment to you here this morning today that I will spend as much time and eat as many Reese's cups as possible to figure out what the difference is between the fresh and perhaps some of the store-boughts. There's the fresh roasted peanuts. It's the experience of being on the line, but there's just something about a fresh Reese's cup. I could really talk about chocolates and sweets and confections all day, but let's try to get to the meat of what we really want to talk about this morning, and that's really about technology and creativity and experimentation, and how I believe that through a good practice of experimentation, we can bring technology and creativity together to really create some amazing creative product. I'm going to walk through each of these in a little bit more detail in just a few moments with some examples of work that we've done both at Hershey's and some work that I've done at prior organizations, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of background first to level set where I'm coming from. Specifically at the Hershey Company, as Kevin mentioned, I work in the Digital Innovation Lab. We work on a variety of technologies and ideas that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road to how we can figure out we can best leverage and communicate with customers, consumers, and our teammates within the Hershey Company. On screen now you see a few different examples of some of the technologies and things that we are working on, from your variety of mixed realities, of augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality, et cetera, things like chat and virtual assistants, as well as robotics and things like that. And my personal background is actually mechanical engineering. I went to the Harvard of the South, the University of South Florida, go Bulls, and I worked in a research and development lab right out of school. So coming out of that environment to me some 20-odd years ago and coming back into a research and development lab here at Hershey's was really a great natural fit for me. Prior to coming to Hershey's, I worked in the advertising business for about 20 years, where I was an executive creative director for the last part of my tenure there. A lot of that time was spent breaking down this dogmatic notion that creativity was the province of art and copy. I'm pretty sure with statements like this here that Sony is pretty much trolling us with this idea about how technology could enrich human creativity. I'm a very strong believer that technology is almost the prime mover when it comes to how creativity advances now. To that end, here's a very literal example of what creativity or what technology can do for us with creativity. If you haven't seen this is a product from Google called Tilt Brush. It is a virtual reality headset service that artists can use to create in three-dimensional spaces. You see the artists here walking around their art, walking through their art, walking up to their art. And I think what happens is when you've got this blending of technology and creativity and such a strong relationship between the two, technology or creativity in particular is affected by technology because technology moves so quickly. Those same clock cycles through which technology moves is going to affect creativity and move through those same quick-paced clock cycles, as Kevin mentioned this morning. You probably all are overwhelmed and overboard by all the talk with artificial intelligence and what a trend and what a bit of a technology is that we should be looking at for that. There's a lot of discussions right now with how artificial intelligence is affecting creativity and will affect creative. This really reminds me a lot of the work that was going on about 10 or so years ago when we were all trying to make the transition creativity to moving to these little pieces of plastic and aluminum and glass. So I think, I'll make a prediction right now, that I think that in 10 years what's going to happen is we're actually going to find a lot of data scientists actually within creative teams. If you consider the work that goes on within artificial intelligence and within data sciences, a great deal of that work is actually involved with taking data and visualizing it, making these visualizations to make these very, very perhaps esoteric relationships and algorithms relatable to normal human beings like you and me. And so what we need to do is figure out ways through which that we can bring technology and creativity together better. Excuse me, and I believe, as I mentioned, a key component to that is experimentation. I don't think that there's probably any lack of appreciation for the need for experimentation within creative teams. There's just an inability to get started doing experimentation through one reason or another. You know, we've all got work to do, and experimentation feels like a thing that happens within research and development, and within creativity, research and development isn't necessarily a focus for any one group. So these are some possible ways through which that we could enable already eager teams that want to get started and learn more about tech and creativity and how to bring them together. And the first notion to bring all that together really is this idea that I'm calling respect the waffle. And what we're doing here is setting a fundamental understanding within your organization of what experimentation is. And it's this idea that when you are executing something new from a technology standpoint, you're probably not going to get it right. And I want to use a personal example, which I somewhat related on this, is that for many years, our Sunday morning ritual at my house was always a big Sunday morning breakfast. And the centerpiece of that was a big stack of waffles. And it didn't matter that we always had the same waffle iron and we always used that same recipe. We always expected that first waffle was going to be that experimental waffle to test that the iron was hot enough or that the batter was at the right consistency. And we usually wound up giving that first waffle to the dog, quite honestly, because maybe something didn't quite go right with how it was baked. And I think with technology, the first time you're executing a new idea for technology, it's going to be maybe a little underbaked, a little overbaked, and you could wind up with, quite honestly, a lumpy piece of service code. So it's the idea that when you're executing your own experimentation projects, you shouldn't expect that the first time you're going to try it, you're not going to get it right. And your teams should recognize that you're not going to get it right and just go in with the expectation that the only reason you're undertaking this is to learn something new. The worst situation at all that could happen is the first time you're trying to do learn about a new piece of technology when you've actually got a piece of client work on the hook or you've got a departmental piece of work that's on the hook, and then it's the expectation that you're going to create something great when it's the first time you're doing it, and that very rarely happens. So what you're doing is you're hopefully taking some production-ready inputs and creating something that you're going to be able to learn from. You're creating this rebranding of experimentation. You're creating a shorthand through which you could have conversations with your internal teams about taking on new experiments. It's been my experience that when you're able to have this shorthand notation about what your experimentations are, you're able to talk about them more freely, and able to actually identify these projects more often. Referring back a bit to the work that we're doing at Hershey's, the work that we're doing actually with robotics is very much in line with what Waffle projects are. It's actually a series of Waffle projects designed to learn more about how people are interacting with robots and robotic experiences. Now, as you can probably guess, and I don't think I'm saying anything untoward here by saying that Hershey's is not going to be building any robots anytime soon. But what we are interested in doing is creating experiences for how people could reasonably expect to interact with Hershey's brand through a robotics experiment. As you may have seen, there are a number of retailers out there now who are experimenting themselves with robotics, putting robots into stores, either in front of customers or off hours when customers are there doing basic things like janitorial service, cleaning up in aisles. They're not really expected to have a whole lot of human interactivity. But at some point, what could be the expectations be for when these robots do have to have interactions with humans, with your regular consumers walking the aisles of your grocery stores? So what would those experiences look like? And what we're trying to do really is understand what those experiences could wind up being. At the end of all this work that we're doing, we're not going to have a piece of metal and glass and plastic that is a robot, but what we are going to have is this knowledge base, this set of understandings for how robotic experiences potentially work, which is going to enable us to have quicker conversations with our teams, both internally and externally, about what could happen in the future about robotics. It enables us to move very quickly from questions about technology into solutions for creativity and strategy about robotics. So now that we've talked about this sort of framework, this base level framework of understanding for how you could talk about experimentations within your groups, I want to move on to the next topic, which this one involves Lilypads, and that's more specifically to love the Lilypad. When you get a new technology, it's really tempting, devilishly tempting, to try and take that experience, that piece of tech and try to learn everything you can about it all at once. I'm guilty of it as well. It's like opening up that present on Christmas morning and unwrapping it and trying to do everything that you can with it at that time. But what I'm suggesting to you here with this Lilypad idea is break that new technology down into a learnable set of chunks from which you can build upon. By taking something on in these smaller digestible chunks, you're setting yourself up for greater success with each effort. What you want to do is set up these experiments which you can build upon, move from Lilypad to Lilypad to continue to build your successes on and continue to learn more. What's going to happen is when you break it down into these smaller chunks, these smaller projects probably are going to manifest some new ideas and some new things that you're not going to realize or you wouldn't get to realize if you had a larger project in and of itself. Quite honestly, as Kevin mentioned a few moments ago, the pace of technological change is so rapid and so fast anyways, trying to do everything all at once is a little bit self-defeating because by the time you've got it all figured out, there's so much change that has happened since you've started, what you've learned may already be obsolete. I want to use an example of a piece of work that I did a number of years ago when I was still in the advertising business as an example. A few years ago, a client was releasing a new product which enabled workers to reach record heights on the job site. This happened to coincide with the explosion of commercially viable virtual reality headsets. And we were very, very eager to learn more about how we could use virtual reality to do storytelling for our clients. We were very much inspired. We wanted to inspire the client, but we realized that it was going to be quite a leap moving from our regular production methods to 360-degree production methods. And we didn't want to try to take it all on at once, so we decided to break it down into a series of projects over a course of about 18 months. So the first place we started was using 360-degree static photography. At these trade events and at these exhibits, putting somebody in a piece of machinery and taking them up to almost 200 feet in the sky is not something you can normally do. So we figured we could do something, closest thing that we could was just to use virtual reality. We learned about new things that had to be done, at least from a static photographic method, in terms of some production, some execution, working with 360-degree assets, moving 360-degree assets through new workflows and new skills that we had to acquire in order to make all this work correctly. So we had developed a new set of skills and a new set of language that we had to incorporate into our processes. Now that we had those, we took the next step in this learning, and we developed what we called our immersion room. Instead of head-mounted virtual reality glasses, we put small groups of visitors inside a room where we projected 270 degrees of content on these horizontal walls. This content was a combination of computer-generated imagery as well as live-action video. So what we were able to do was that, again, take our information that we had learned from static imagery to 360-degree video and apply it into this larger space. It enables us to, again, iterate through our skill set and learn about how we could start producing quality video in 360-degree spaces. Now, it wasn't full 360 degrees, of course, but this, again, was a small step forward towards that. We learned about things like spatial audio and the attention-grabbing methods to focus attention for people no matter where they're looking in the room. Then the next big thing was an actual true 360-degree live action video. The client happened to be introducing a new safety feature, and we wanted to actually put people within the equipment. So what you see on screen here is actually a short snippet of that video presented as a 2D video. So of course, when you can't move the people, it's great to give them this, which was the next best thing, and put the people in the equipment. From our prior experiences with those earlier projects, what we were able to learn was that despite the fact that 360 generally would consider virtual reality as a singular experience when somebody has a headphone on, what we were able to learn was that people actually viewed it as very much a community experience if they were able to experience it with other people. So you see on the left here, we were actually set up a display where people were able to go in groups, put on headsets, and experience it as teams. It gave us some great insight into how we do flow control and how we could move people through it as groups. And of course, you know, when we were all done with this project, we were thinking that 360-degree video was probably the last thing we'd ever have to learn in the field of video, because nothing ever changes, right? So what's happened now is we're actually on the cusp of another potentially new technology coming through for video. Whereas with 360-degree video, and you've got an inward-looking out point of view, and you're telling your story from still a fixed point looking out, there's a new format coming out called volumetric video, where it's outside looking in. Computer processing power, software has advanced enough to allow us to start layering on in a real three-dimensional volumetric space imagery over a single scene. Rather than capturing two-dimensional pixels on a flat screen, what you're able to do now is capture real three-dimensional pixels representing spatial orientation in an area. And it allows you to do some really amazing, realistic representation of storytelling. I actually heard a story at South by recently where a filmmaker was talking about moving into this space and how they actually had to change the narrative of their story from actors throwing punches to actors using sticks in a fight, because now that people could move their scene, their viewpoint around anywhere in the scene, the viewers of the video could actually start seeing the fakeness of the punch. They saw the fake blows, so they had to actually change the narration. Of course, with volumetric video, and just like with 360 video, this is not going to be the right video format for all stories. It's going to take experiment, and I think it's going to take some concentrated effort by technologists and creative teams to work together to find the right stories where volumetric video makes the most sense. And really, finally, the last point I'd like to impart is a suggestion as to how to get started. And that's really the idea of choose your own adventure. Start with yourselves. Quite honestly, experiment on yourselves. Don't wait for an outside actor or a condition to arrive and present an experiment for you, experimentation opportunity for you. I'm sure within your teams right now there are challenges or problems that you would like to solve. And I'm sure that there are teams eager that are willing to get started and work on solving those problems. So please, my encouragement would be to locate those teams and just get started. Showing my geek background just a little bit, be your own dungeon master. If you set your own adventure, then you get to set the direction in which you take your experiments. This direction really, again, leverage the skills and the talents of the teams that you've got. The creative teams very much have a DIY mentality, so I think there's probably very much a great interest with your teams to actually go out and try to find solutions to their problems. The very last project that I worked on as an advertising professional was to help our internal agency and our clients make this transition from style guides into design systems. As a brief reminder, design systems are a modular and modern look at style guides. They are built completely online and concepted in such a way that allows anybody who interacts with them to actually have a contribution to them. As we know, brands manifest themselves in a variety of different channels nowadays, and they are consumed by a variety of different methods. So it's really important to have a living, breathing design system through which you can express your brand and keep everybody on the same page. What the team was we built a bit of a Trojan horse for artificial intelligence, and we created a design systems bot, what we called it, into the design system. So not only did we solve the problem with moving to design systems, but we used artificial intelligence to help do that. What we did was we created a chatbot which would create an interface into the design system where you could ask it things like, what is our brand voice, and get a response. You could ask it things like, what is our approved secondary font face, and get a response. You could ask it all kinds of different things which you would normally like to maybe search on in a printed book or search for online, but get it into a very friendly conversational mechanism. The bot was available over Teams and SMS chat available everywhere. And everybody really was able to help with this. If you're taking a look at artificial intelligence, your initial thought about that might be it's a very technically forward type of trend or an idea. And quite honestly, from the first time we took a look at it, so did we. Our technical teams were able to learn a lot about how the frameworks used to build bots could exist, how you would consume artificial intelligence services, and how you could do cross-channel publication. But then what we discovered really was that there's a whole heck of a lot of work for your non-technical teams, especially your content folks working in conversational design. It's very important to develop the right personality and develop a conversational UI and quite honestly, a conversational artificial intelligence that's going to really engage your users and allow them to really feel like they want to come back and use this product. Working with the technical teams, our content teams were able to tailor the tools to build they were able to contribute on their own to the conversations and the dialogues. At the end of it all, the conversational teams were actually working directly with the artificial intelligence engines. Then, of course, you cannot forget about your analytics and your data folks. This gave them an opportunity to learn about the new metrics and the behavior interpretations that come with those new metrics. They were able to work very closely with our copy folks, through which they could then tailor and iterate through the content that had to go back into the bot. At the end of it all, we had a lot of different teams working together, looking to solve this problem that we were having internally, but we were also then able to build out this knowledge about what it really takes to execute against an artificial intelligence or a natural language processing problem, so that when the clients come through and have this question, we can have an intelligent conversation about them. So in summation, I would just like to talk about, again, the importance of bringing your technology and your creative teams together through experiments, setting expectations, stepping through these experiments, and really there's no reason why you potentially can't start now with bringing your teams together through experimentation.